buy low, sell high, right? Guys we think that have kind of reached their maximum fantasy value for you when it comes to your roster and what you can try and get on that one on the trade block, and guys to potentially target with buy lows. So let's kind of go through here and get some thoughts here on buy low, sell high. Let's start with the sell highs.
Sell highs. So I guess one of the guys on my sell high list, and then, heck, we didn't even talk about this. Um, Mike Evans. This hamstring injury scares me. Yes, they're coming into a bye week, that type of thing, but he has performed well. So if teams are in need of a solid wide receiver one, right, with really a wide receiver two floor there for Mike Evans, he's a guy that I'd be looking to sell high and try and return value, because I just don't know that this hamstring injury with him needing the MRI and everything else, like I'm worried enough about it that people aren't paying attention, and I'm going to put him out on the trade block and see at least what's out there, right? If I can move him to get a piece, if I'm hurting at running back and I can sell Mike Evans and get a David Montgomery, if I can get a, maybe even as a Josh Jacobs, right? A guy who's underperformed here a little bit. Do something like that. Josh Jacobs might be the ceiling. I don't know that you're getting anything higher than that, but definitely an option there that I'm looking for a sell high for me personally.
Yeah, Derek, go ahead. Run through some of the names that you've got here.
All right. So Zach Moss, another guy that I'd be looking at to sell high on this one. Zach Moss, right? Like where we've seen him really shine and get into running back one territory has been games that Anthony Richardson left early and or missed. Right, on the one game we've seen them back. Right, he still put up a solid performance in RB2, but you are going to have major concerns about Anthony Richardson taking the touchdown work away there. Not only that, even if Anthony Richardson doesn't become the problem with the vulturing of touchdowns there, you've got another guy vulturing the snaps here, and that's going to be Jonathan Taylor looking to come back. Right, reports are that the plan is for him to return to practice this week. So I'm looking to see if there's somebody out there that hasn't really been paying attention to some of those finer news points out there, and see if I can't flip Zach Moss to get to get something back on this one. And really, I'd be looking even anything in a wide receiver two type of territory, even similar type of running back capital there. If I could flip him for even like an Alexander Madison, right? Like Alexander Madison should still give you some volume there. Miles Sanders has been a guy that's been kind of a disappointing start. Damian Pierce, another guy that's been a little bit of a disappointing start there, and see if you couldn't get some guys that have a little bit clearer pass instead of a very firm, um, you know, handcuff, spellback type of deal.
Yeah, another name you got there is Puka Nakua. And we had a pretty healthy discussion surrounding Puka. We kind of talked about it earlier in the show too with Cooper Kupp. Like when Cooper Kupp comes back, we anticipate that Puka Nakua is going to have a diminished role in this Rams offense, right? You have to anticipate. Kupp is eligible to come off of IR starting this week. I think you can reasonably get more than what you will get at any other point in the season for Puka Nakua right now, because I think that it's when Kupp comes in, his usage goes down, his name won't be as hot. So, like this is the perfect. I think Zach Moss encapsulates kind of what we were trying to accomplish with this. A guy that if you don't move on him now, you're probably going to be stuck getting peanuts for him. I think Puka is kind of that same way. I don't know that this is the week that you have to move off of Puka. Perhaps next week or when we finally see, Cooper Kupp participate in a full week of practice. But I think if you have Puka Nakua, am I saying that right? It's Nakua, right? Yeah. If you have Nakua and you don't move him, and Cooper Kupp comes back and throws up 100 yards and a touchdown, you're not getting anything for Puka Nakua the next week.
Yeah, this is kind of one of those situations where, yes, it stings. Yes, it feels kind of dirty, but I'd rather be a week early on moving him than a week late and having your value completely diminished, like you said. Another guy that I have on a sell high list, Keenan Allen, right? Keenan Allen has been on a tear. Losing Mike Williams is going to affect this. Teams are going to be able to kind of focus in on him. Austin Eckler coming back is going to take pressure off of him. So where some of these targets where they would go other places were funneled into Keenan Allen, right? We have seen a really good 4-game stretch. Week 4, not so great, but weeks 1, 2, and 3 were really, really good. So he's a guy that I'm looking to flip. That being said, I'm making sure I get fair value. I am okay with Keenan Allen being my number 2 wide receiver because that's what I drafted him to be anyway, right? These first 4 weeks have been a bonus. But if you can flip him, if I can get Keenan Allen, I would do Keenan Allen for Jamar Chase right now, right? And just see how frustrated is the Jamar Chase owner, right? Joe Burrow's been hurt. Chase hasn't really performed. He's presumably had the worst part of his season, and we're putting that behind him now. Keenan Allen has arguably had the best part of his season. Maybe you're able to marry that up. And I think that's a realistic ceiling. So that would be something that I'd be looking for. Or if you're starving for running back help, right? If you're starving for running back help, I'd go Keenan Allen for Austin Eckler straight up. See what they do, right? If you're hurting that bad, Keenan Allen for Saquon Barkley, and see what you're able to do. Don't be afraid to shoot for big names. Keenan Allen does have the name power. He has the first quarter of the season to back up what you're asking for these running backs who have been hurt and off the field. So you're asking a high price, but this is why you're selling him right now, and you're not waiting till after the bye week or a week later than that, especially if you're a team that's hurting and you need to make a move. If he's your only real piece, move him. Get a couple pieces that'll help your team and fill out your roster.
I like that. Another guy on the list, Deebo Samuel. And this is a guy that we were talking about early on, all the way back in the preseason, that we thought that that Brandon Ayuk was going to be the guy that outpointed him, even though the draft capital was reversed on this one. So far through a couple of weeks of the season, that very much is coming to fruition, and I don't expect it to change. However, Deebo had a monster game with Ayuk out 2 weeks ago on this one, and still is up there in a very high wide receiver 2 type of role, type of ranking on that. And this is the point where you can probably return the most value still on that one.
And people are infatuated with Deebo.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
He is a polarizing fantasy figure. Nothing wrong with the guy, right? Like Deebo, the guy, great guy, great competitor, but he's a polarizing fantasy figure because you are either on he's the man or I'm not buying.
What a worthless piece of junk.
No, not necessarily that, but you just don't buy any of the hype, right? Like right. Derek and I are very much on the side of we don't buy any of the Deebo hype. Yes, he had a great game against a piss-poor New York Giants team on Thursday Night Football without Brandon Ayuk. Fast forward to this week, Ayuk still got his. He didn't fall into the end zone. They saved every single one of those for McCaffrey.
Mm-hmm.
But Ayuk still got there, right? 8 receptions, 115 yards, or 7 receptions, 115 yards, whatever it was. Deebo was non-existent.
Right. And this is one of those that right now, with kind of the way that the wide receivers are out there, I'd probably look to see if I couldn't flip him. Right, Jamar Chase was an interesting name you brought up there, right? Like Deebo still has the star power and name power that you could potentially get a deal done there, right? I think that we see Jamar Chase kind of bounce back over the back half here as Burrow's calf gets healthy. Chris Olave coming off an absolutely horrendous game there, where Derek Carr, looked like he couldn't get the ball down the field, and so one of those that yes, Derek Carr in a couple of weeks we'll be back to doing Derek Carr type of things, and we'll see probably Chris Olave return to form on what we saw weeks 1, 2, 3. But this is one of those that you could potentially try and flip that, and so it looks like you're moving down, but ultimately long term you're moving up on that one because right, like Chris Olave, pretty sure he's going to get up into right around wide receiver 1, back end wide receiver 1, top end wide receiver 2 territory, and I don't think Debo finishes there. So you're kind of just moving the chains there a little bit on that one. Even a guy like Amari Cooper wouldn't mind going that route there as well, right? Like I'm getting the number 1 target on that one instead of Debo, who very well, when the season's all said and done, could be the 3rd most targeted guy on this offense.
Yeah.
So, any other buy or any other sell high candidates out there?
That's a pretty good list of guys that you are willing to move from. Because again, let's think about this. It's because we don't see them having as productive weeks as they have had the first 4. Right? We see a drop off coming here. Likewise, when we flip the script here to these buy lows, guys who have not had very good first 4 weeks, but we anticipate having a good rest of the way. I think there's a reason why this list is a little bit longer.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we talked about this pre-show. Potentially Nico Collins, right? Like, I don't know that his performance drops off precipitously, but he has really come out of nowhere. And for a guy that you picked either late in the draft or picked up off the waiver wire to be sitting at their wide receiver 9, is that what he is in half point?
Stroud really likes him.
Actually, I think likes him. Yeah, I'll get the ranking on that one. But I think
he's 7 in full point.
Yeah, I'll get the full deal on that.
Another guy, high ceiling, right? Like if you're able to, grab him and
Nico's 7.5 points.
7, so he's 7.5 point too. So there you go. I mean, so I'd be poking around, right? Like, what are we thinking here for, Amon-Ra St. Brown, for Jalen Waddle, right? For Chris Olave, for that type of thing, and kind of see how it goes. Brandon Ayuk, CD Lamb, like all those guys are guys that I would be looking at as a Nico owner. Like, hey, like, is this a possibility? Like, the answer is always no unless you ask, right? And so capitalize when he's high, shop him, see what people are interested in. Hey, I know your guys kind of underperformed here. I have this guy, like, straight up, or if you need a tight end piece back, something kind of minuscule, see if you can make it work and go from there. Because yes, Nico's been great. I don't know if you're going to be seeing too many more 178, 168, whatever yard games and 2 touchdowns. Right?
No. So I don't think you see that, but I do still think that he's got 32 targets through 4 games. Like,
absolutely. Yeah. If you don't get your price, don't move him. Right.
Yeah,
that's part of the sell high. Like,
a
lot of these guys, Zach Moss, I do think kind of drops off with this Jonathan Taylor thing. But other than that, don't sell yourself short, right? That's why you're selling high. If you don't get fair value or feel like you're improving your team long-term, you do sit on these guys, right? You're not selling them for peanuts, but you are shopping them. Like, you might as well see what the temperature is. Like, hey, do you like this guy? Hey, he's been seeing tons of targets in this offense. Hey, he, is, he's the stack, right? If you're playing with guys who like that idea of having a stack and can go different ways. So hit up the Stroud owner, hit up some of these guys who have had these low end wide receiver 1s, high end wide receiver 2s who have not performed well year to date. If you think that bounce back is coming, then that's who you're targeting. Because if nothing else, you break even, right? Like that you want to win the trade, but if nothing else, it breaks even. And you go from there. Or if Nico's your 4th receiver, right? Then you start looking at, running backs. Again, Josh Jacobs, do you look at something, Joe Mixon and a piece, right? Something like that. Like if they, if you're hurting at tight end, but you can get a RB2 roughly, even if it's a low end RB2 to help anchor that room for you, and a piece where you maybe don't have to stream tight end as much, go for it. I mean, Nico Collins for Sam Laporta and Ramondre Stevenson isn't a bad deal.
No, it's not.
Just thoughts, right? Just kind of one of those other guys.
I like it. And it's one of those that I kind of went through and was looking through some of these guys that, through the first 4 weeks last year, like, all of these that, we constantly hear a lot of guys go, well, I don't want to come off of my guy. I got him super cheap and I believe in the talent long-term, yada, yada, yada. Right. Like, and we heard a lot of those same things around guys like Cordell Patterson, James Robinson, Khalil Herbert last year through 4 weeks. None of those guys finished inside the top 24 at the position of running back, right? Like, and we can go through and pick out a lot of these guys that had 3 or 4 really good weeks to start the season and then faded down the back half. Cortland Sutton at the wide receiver last year, Curtis Samuel last year. You had a lot of these guys that were mid to high end wide receiver 2 type of deals that finished in wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 territory. And if you were going to move them, you should have moved them early on when they had that, because that was what they were going to do, right? Christian Kirk got off to that great tear and faded down the back half as well, right? Like, that would have been a sell high candidate for you as well.
Absolutely.
So, all right, let's get into this the buy lows here. What are your thoughts here on some of the buy low candidates?
I feel like the buy low, it's a longer list, right? It's, you pick off some of these. So, Josh Jacobs is a name that I've kind of tossed out a couple different times tonight. Josh Jacobs, to me, is a good buy low candidate, right? You want to be touching base with that owner. Hey, what are your feelings on this? Hey, really struggling. That Vegas offensive line looks like trash. They're trailing all these games. Like, I don't think he's going to be seeing the same run. And just talk him down a little bit, but at the same time, like, hey, I can help you a little bit. And make him a piece of that option. But Josh Jacobs is a guy, again, if you're needing running back help, he is the guy, right? So that's what you're targeting. Low performers to this point who are going to get a ton of run. Jacobs is going to see a ton of run. He will continue to get fed in Las Vegas, and he is he's kind of one of the premium buy low candidates that I'm at least looking at right now, having a conversation with that owner.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley's another guy that I'd be looking to potentially buy low on this one as well, right? Like, he's been pretty disappointing, except outside of like 3 separate quarters of the season, right? But this is, again, a guy that I'm a believer in what this Jags offense is looking like long-term and going forward. And this is a guy that the believer in what they're going to do offensively, believer in the talent. And I think that those 2 things are going to finally kind of merge and mesh as we get going through this back half here. But it's going to be kind of incredibly rocky. So, one of those that if I can flip a low end RB2 potentially, but or look at potentially packaging 2 wide receivers that have been performing decently well there. I'd probably look to see if I could get a Calvin Ridley type of move there. You guys out there, if you could, I'm trying to think, like, Cortland Sutton and maybe Tutu Atwell type of deal. Like, if you could potentially try and package that over and send that through and see what you could try and get on that one. I think both Cortland Sutton and Tutu Atwell are guys that they're almost sell high candidates at this point now too. So what's another name you got?
A couple of these other running backs fall into the same vein, right? Breece Hall, Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, guys who are going to be seeing either they're the 1A or they're the primary back, whether it's because of injury, right? All these guys have missed time. Breece Hall's coming back from missing time, but Jones missed time, Eckler missed time. So those are 4 running backs, right? In an area where people are starving a little bit. it's worth touching base on all of them. Saquon falls into this too, another running back, because he missed time. People are still going to be high on Saquon, but they're not going to be nearly as high today as they were after week 1, right? So the price tag has come down. Check and see what it is. If it's too rich, you move on. If it's worth negotiating, then you dive into it. But I think all those running backs, these 4 or 5 running backs that I've listed off, are all guys who can produce big for you down the stretch. If you need to make a move, that's kind of where you look to make a move, because they have underwhelmed thus far for the season.
Absolutely. Alex, any buy low candidates for you?
So he's kind of a waiver wire pickup, but if you got somebody, there's Jaleel McLaughlin, who's Denver running back. Look, I have no idea what's going on. Full disclosure, haven't sought out watching a Denver Broncos game at all this year, and honestly, my Sundays have been better for it. It has been frustrating as Denver fans. It has been frustrating for me to check the box score periodically throughout Sunday. So I can honestly say I haven't seen, why Javonte Williams isn't getting the football. I don't exactly know why Samaje Perine isn't really living up to what he should have been doing in the absence of Javonte Williams. But I can tell you what I have seen is this Jaleel McLaughlin, who played his way onto the roster from training camp and through the preseason. Sean Payton likes the dude, so he keeps finding ways to get him on the field. I think he's the guy. I shouldn't say the guy, but I think he's, if you're going to stash a running back for, mid-season push, this Jaleel McLaughlin, I think, is one of the guys. So if you can find him on your waiver wire, now is the time to get him. You may not have to spend anything for him, or if you have to, get rid of something to get him from somebody else. You can never have enough running backs, right? And I think he's going to be a I don't want to say prominent feature, but I do think that the Broncos are going to find ways to get the ball in his hands as we move forward this season.
I think there's some truth to that, right? Javonte misses significant time, or at least some time, with this hip flexor injury. If it's a nagging thing and they're going to be careful bringing him back, again, I think you're right. McLaughlin's going to see some extra run. We'll see if Perine picks up some of it, most of it, but he's not going to pick up all of it. So McLaughlin will be involved in this offense a little bit deeper here for probably the next couple weeks, until we figure out what the extent timetable is for Javonte to come back.
Fair enough. Any other thoughts here on some buy low candidates?
Wide receiver wise, there's a couple on here, right? I think Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, right, are all interesting for different reasons. Drake London's interesting because I'm not convinced Desmond Ridder finishes this season with being the starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. If Taylor Heineke becomes the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons at any point this season, Drake London's back in play in a pretty large way, right? Heineke's a little bit more of a gunslinger. He knows how to feature a number one guy. He did a pretty good job of it with Terry McLaurin when he was with Washington. So I do think that instantly increases London's ceiling. And you can get him for pretty dirt cheap because he's like wide receiver 50 right now. So, you shouldn't have to trade a whole heck of a lot to get him. Jalen Waddle, even with being healthy, yes, the one game out due to the concussion has kind of underwhelmed. He has not had his big games yet this season. I think that time is coming. So take a guy who's underperformed here a little bit. Same thing with Jamar Chase. How frustrated are they with him and Joe Burrow? How has that looked like as far as their ability to maintain a roster construction without their top 3 pick in the draft, right? What's that look like for them? So I think Chase is an interesting guy to look at. And then, those 3 are kind of the big wide receiver buy lows for me here at the moment.
All righty. I like it. Any other thoughts on buy low or sell high?
You don't know unless you ask, right? You got to start a conversation somewhere. Hey, how are you feeling about this? Hey, does this interest you? Hey, do you have interest in him? Hey, what's the price tag here? Like, you got to ask these questions to get it started. And sometimes that takes you throwing out the first offer. Sometimes you're able to talk about it, at least kind of understand the parameters of what someone's looking for ahead of time. But again, you got to treat it like a business, right? You can't be too attached to these players that you say never. But at the same time, they are assets on your team. And if you're giving up assets, you want to receive proper value in return for said asset. So it's a balancing act. It's not easy to trade, right? Like people in this industry talk about it very freely, right? Oh, we'll just trade this, trade that. And at times I feel like we get cavalier about it, but we definitely talk about trading pieces for other pieces. It's not easy, right? People's mindsets, their personalities, whether they're, if it's their hometown team, if it's their favorite player that they have a secret man crush on. I mean, all the things come into play. Sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not, right? But the answer is always no, and your roster never changes unless you ask and start tossing out ideas.